maybe this is all being set up to make us think it's an external attack when really there's something else going on.
Did you see the article that came out on Fox News on Monday about how China has been infiltrating American cyber infrastructure without being detected for over a fucking year?
I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjakovic. And we are unapologetically outspoken.
Hey everyone, and happy Friday. So after the climate agenda episode that we did on Wednesday, we thought it would be perfect to talk about the new Netflix movie that is getting a ton of buzz on social media. And it's all about this like apocalyptic type event. And the movie is called Leave the World Behind. Now, before we get started, this episode has like some spoilers. So if you haven't watched it yet, you might want to watch it first and then come back. We don't give away like too much, but just enough to like make it really interesting because there's so much symbolism and just crazy shit throughout this movie. And it would take us hours to go through all of it. So we're going to try to keep it like relevant to what's happening right now in the world. So this movie has like all of the conspiracy theorists going crazy, right? Because like I said, there's just symbolism everywhere you look. Like there's Illuminati symbols and like the paintings on the walls and all kinds of like historical events tied to little details on the set and things like that. So anyhow, in the movie, Julia Roberts plays the main character. And from the very start of the movie, she talks about how she hates people and she just like can't wait to go on vacation to this place that's very isolated without hardly any people around. And I think this really is like set up in the beginning to paint the picture of how our society is right now. Like we're all so disconnected. Nobody wants to talk face to face anymore. Everyone is pretty much divided. And like we see so much hate going on in the world, right? And so in this movie, at one point, she's asked why she's like that. And she goes on this like rant of how people are all fake because we're all just programmed by advertisers and we're told what to think and feel. And I think it's like a little hint about this whole movie being predictive programming. And so her daughter in the movie is obsessed with the show Friends. And like later on in the movie, her brother's asking her, like, why are you so obsessed with this show? Why do you keep bringing it up? And she tells him that she loves the people in the show and she cares about them and how no one in real life ever listens to her. And so again, it's just like painting this picture of a society that's completely disconnected, even from our own family members. And like these fake characters online are who we feel closest to, which isn't far-fetched at all. And so the family goes to this like isolated small town on their vacation and all kinds of weird things start happening. Like the internet keeps going out and a bunch of deer start coming close to the people, like really close and just acting very strange, almost like they're trying to warn the people of something. And the next part of the movie is the owners of the rental house where the family's staying just show up in the middle of the night out of the blue. And they say that New York City had this big blackout and the bridges are blocked and like they feel like something's happening and they're scared. So they wanted to come back to their house. And at this point, no one's phones are working and the TV just has this like emergency broadcast message, but doesn't really give any information. So there's no way of knowing what's going on because like all communication is cut off. And it's kind of eerie considering we just did that episode on Wednesday of Biden's climate agenda and how this is going to cause all kinds of blackouts and brownouts throughout the country. So anyhow, the family, once they kind of realize like this is not good, they decide to pack up and leave to head to her sister's house in New Jersey. And they end up in like this terrifying scene where all these electric vehicles, self-driving electric vehicles, are programmed to all crash into each other on the bridge. So this causes the bridge to become completely backed up, making it impossible to leave. And it's scary considering, again, how we were just talking about our government pushing all electric vehicles. And like, I guess, Tara, we should add that to our list of why we shouldn't go 100% electric.
Seriously, right? I mean, we've been talking a lot recently about AI and robots going rogue and or falling into the wrong hands. And I honestly didn't even think about the fact that self-driving electric vehicles literally have the potential to be programmed like this, to go to a specific location or basically have their programming disabled altogether. So as far-fetched as it may seem that, I think they were all Teslas in this movie that crashed into each other. When you think about it, it's really not that unrealistic of a concept at all. And then the scene with the planes, right? There's scenes where planes in the movie are crashing into the ocean and crashing into buildings because their navigation systems are basically taken over during the cyber attack. And again, I don't necessarily think it's completely unrealistic, especially when we talk in context of what our government wants to do with using AI to remotely operate drones and aircraft for military purposes, because those talks are on the table.
Okay, I totally forgot about this until you said that. I was watching an episode. I don't even know who the guy was, but he was um saying that if there was an EMP attack, he's like, I will tell you immediately, like within seconds, 200,000 people will die. And I think it was Joe Rogan was like, what do you mean? Like, how would 200,000 people die right away? He's like, because the planes will literally fall out of the sky because like everything will shut off. And so I totally forgot about that because that's what was happening in the movie, which is terrifying because according to this guy, that actually would be realistic if there was like an EMP attack. So, and another scene that was like really creepy, the son's teeth begin falling out. And so they're like,
Wait, before you go on, when I was watching this scene, I kept waiting for it to be a dream
me
sequence.
too. Me
I was
too.
like, this can't really be happening.
Yeah, because he like they all just woke up and I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, clearly they're dreaming. No, like he's like, Mom, my mouth feels weird. And he just starts like plucking all of his teeth out. It was like so creepy. And they're all obviously like, what the fuck? Like, this is what's happening. And so the only thing that they could think to do was take him to this doomsday prepper's house, played by Kevin Bacon. And they wanted to see like if he has antibiotics or like anything that would help the son. So they go over there and Kevin Bacon like comes out on the porch and he's like immediately on edge and he has his gun and he's like telling them to back up to their car and then eventually like pulls the gun on them, telling them to leave. Just highlighting the fact that like as human beings, we will instantly turn on each other in a chaotic event. And that's exactly what was happening, in this movie. And so Ethan Hawke, who's like the dad in the movie, he starts pleading with Kevin Bacon, saying, like, I'm not a real man. I don't know how to survive. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help my son and my family, but like, you do know what to do and you are prepared. And so I need your help. And he's just like begging this guy. And think about that for a second. Like, as soon as he was saying that in the movie, I was like, my husband and I talk about this all the time, how like our generation would be so helpless. We don't know how to do anything. We don't know how to change the oil in the car, how to grow our own food, how to like anything. Like we're just so like reliant on our technology now. So I think it definitely was painting that situation, how like none of us are prepared or would know how to survive if there was an event like this. And then, you have the people that do plan, like this Kevin Bacon guy, that are labeled crazy conspiracy doomsday preppers. But when shit hits the fan, we're all going to want that crazy doomsday prepper helping us. So anyhow, when Kevin Bacon like hears about the boy's teeth, he immediately like knows what's going on and he's like, "Oh yeah, it's probably radiation, from the microwave weapons that have been used." So like throughout the movie there's these like high-pitched noises or frequencies, and what he was saying is that those were microwave weapons and the radiation is now probably causing his son's teeth to fall out. So what did I think of immediately? I thought of Maui and how there's all this speculation. I mean, we've gone in depth. So if you haven't heard the Maui episodes, go listen to them about how those fires were started by lasers, AKA microwave weapons. And like, we know our government has this technology, as do like a lot of the big governments around the world. And then earlier in the movie, the dad, who is played by Ethan Hawke, he sees a drone dropping like thousands of red flyers that are in Arabic. And the only part that they could make out was the part that said "Death to America." So they're thinking like, okay, this has got to be an attack from the Middle East. Well, they're telling Kevin Bacon, the doomsday prepper, about this. And he's like, huh, that's funny because my friend in another state saw a similar thing happen with similar flyers. But these flyers were either in Chinese or Korean. So he was thinking that it was an attack by the Koreans or the Chinese. So, like, at this point, you kind of realize, maybe this is all being set up to make us think it's an external attack when really there's something else going on, right?
Okay, yeah, but since you brought that up, I have to ask you this. Did you see the article that came out on Fox News on Monday about how China has been infiltrating American cyber infrastructure without being detected for over a fucking year?
Yes. Yes, I
Yeah.
could not sleep last night after I heard that.
Yeah, according to the article on Fox, it said, quote, the known targets include the water utility in Hawaii, a port on the US West Coast, and an oil and gas pipeline. The goal is for China to leverage a position over the United States to create chaos, cause panic, and disrupt logistics, end quote. So the Washington Post reported that hackers tied to the China's People's Liberation Army have gained access to more than 24 critical systems in the United States. And the Fox article stated, quote, the goal of any threatening campaign like this is to establish a pre-positioned advantage able to trigger a cascading cyber attack that compromises American infrastructure. An attack on many of these systems would be able to disrupt or destroy control and cause chaos inside the United States, end quote. And I'm not fucking joking, Stephanie. I read this article literally less than an hour after I finished watching the movie last night. And do you remember the scene where the snarky daughter of the guy who owns the house was talking about hackers getting into the power plants?
Yes. Oh my God, I
I was,
forgot about that.
yeah. And I was like, what the actual fuck? Like, this stuff's already happening.
It's already happening. What are the odds that this is all happening right when this movie's #1 trending on Netflix and millions of people have watched it? Like, yeah, I mean, I saw that last night, and as soon as I heard that they had access to the Hawaii water utility, immediately again, I'm like the Maui fires, because what happened? The water turned off. The water wasn't working, and they're actually suing the water utility company now. Interesting that China like hacked into it, and like how China has microwave weapons too. And then it also made me think about like all the train derailments. Like, could a cyber attack have played a role in that? Just like you said, it's like this movie's happening in real time, but then also, this is for like my conspiracy friends out there. Is it really China? Or is this just the media putting this narrative out to keep us all fucking terrified because we just watched a movie about a cyber attack? I don't know. Like, I'm questioning everything now. I'm telling you, this movie is like gonna throw you guys for a loop. So, what I think is the most important part of the movie is when the rental home owner, who's played by Majer Shala, I don't know if I said that right, Ali, tells Ethan Hawke about this like famous client that he has, this big businessman client who told him about the most cost-effective strategy for toppling a government from within. Okay, so listen to this closely. Step 1 or stage 1 is isolation and cutting off all communication and transportation. Make the target as deaf, dumb, and paralyzed as possible. Stage 2 is synchronized chaos, where they terrorize the people with covert attacks and misinformation, take down their defense capabilities, leaving them vulnerable to attacks from extremists and their own military. Without a clear enemy or motive, people will start to turn on each other. And if done successfully, stage 3 will just happen on its own. What is stage 3? It's a coup d'etat, a civil war, a collapse. Okay, Tara, does any of that ring a bell?
I mean, I don't know. It sounds vaguely familiar, like almost like we've talked about this before.
Yeah. So, okay, my mind has gone back and forth on this like a gazillion times. So I'm just going to tell you like how my mind is working right now. Okay. So at the very beginning, the first thing that I thought was, okay, they're trying to subconsciously implant fear around quote unquote right wing extremists. Because just think about like Biden, constantly saying how MAGA extremists are the biggest threat to democracy, and just all the messaging we've heard the past few years about threats to democracy. And like, I thought, if they're talking about a real group of extremists, maybe it's not the right-wing extremists. So like first I was thinking like this whole thing is to set up a subconscious fear in people of the right, of Trump, of the right-wing extremists, blah, blah, blah. But then when I read through those stages again, I was like, holy shit, like what if they're just laying their cards out, right? And they're talking about the real extremists that want to destroy America. Okay. So, like, let's go back over each step with the lens of what the Biden administration is doing, right? Stage one, cutting off communication and transportation. Well, what have they done? They're censoring people, cutting off transportation, maybe like not allowing gas vehicles, not allowing, all these different things. Um, the stupid plan to make like all vehicles electric, even though we don't have the power grid to support it. Biden depleting our oil reserves and like not allowing drilling here, and then keeping people completely divided by race and politics. Because if we're divided, then guess what? We're not going to communicate with one another and we won't band together against the real threat. And then think about like stage two. They flat out say misinformation. Well, we all know now that the real misinformation was from our government around COVID, around the election, and like literally penalizing people that called it out. Next part of stage two, taking down defense capabilities and leaving them vulnerable to attack. Kind of like opening the border and letting millions of unvetted military aged men come through. Or how about spending all of our resources to give to Ukraine, leaving us defenseless here? Or making the military completely undesirable so no one wants to join? Or like making it a bad thing to be masculine and like the whole trans agenda? Like, maybe that's weakening us and leaving us vulnerable. And then step three, civil war. How many times have we said it seems like Biden is intentionally destroying America and pushing us into war? Like, this is their fucking agenda. These are the three stages of their agenda. Plain as day, right there in everyone's faces. Okay. Now, if you think I'm crazy at this point, here is the biggest twist of all. The Obamas are the producers of this movie. Not kidding. Like, they are actually the executive producers. Barack Obama, a man who had access to the most top secret information in the world, was the executive producer of this movie. Like, in what world would there be an ex-president that creates a movie about a country being toppled from within, a country that he once ran? Like,
still runs.
Still runs, right? Like, is the puppeteer. And the director actually said that Obama worked to make this movie more realistic. And a lot of the symbolism throughout the movie, that was not in the book, because there was a book that came out. It was on Obama's book list in 2021, and all this symbolism was added into the movie, which makes me think Obama freaking put it there. So yeah, I absolutely think this is subconsciously programming us. I mean, how many times have we mentioned in the past few months that a cyber attack or an EMP attack are a major concern? And now, right after the movie comes out, the media, that's all they're talking about is this cyber attack. And like, how many times have we heard about the right-wing extremism and like Trump being a threat to democracy, and we have to all fear him because he is a threat to democracy? So what do? You create this movie that's trending #1 on Netflix, and you put all the major A-list actors like painting this picture of a cyber attack, and then this internal threat from extremists and our own government. And like, if that's too far-fetched, don't forget that Netflix, the same thing that this movie's through, came out with a movie called White Noise about a train derailment in East Palestine that would cause a major disaster. Guess what? A year after that movie, it happened. It freaking happened, just like in the movie. So is this movie just like desensitizing us on what's to come? Like, I know, again, it sounds like a stretch, but the subconscious is an incredibly powerful tool. And just like Julia Roberts said, flat out said in the movie, we are being subconsciously controlled by the media, by advertisers, and by the government. They tell us what to think, believe, and feel. So what's your take on it? Am I getting too crazy here?
Okay, so when we when you brought up this movie, I hadn't seen it yet. But then as soon as you told me it was produced by the Obamas, I was like, okay, fuck, I need to check this out. And like my hackles immediately went up when you said the movie has to do with the collapse of society due to a cyber attack. And like, really, how coincidental is that coincidental in air quotes, that the Obamas would be involved in this movie, right? And so we've done episodes in the past where we've talked about predictive programming and subliminal messaging and like coming from the perspective of our knowledge of law of attraction and manifestation. Like we both know that these are incredibly powerful tools for programming not only the subconscious, but also the conscious mind. And we know there's this push for the one world global agenda of control, and all the elites, including the Obamas, are part of this. So it's like this isn't a conspiracy theory, it's a fact. Because, like we say all the time, they're not even trying to hide it. You can go online to the World Economic Forum website, you can go to the UN's website, and you can see what their actual plans are. So it's not a fucking conspiracy. But, like, let's think about this. One of the biggest keys to achieving this global agenda is breaking down societal bonds and weakening people. Like, as you talked about, they've already successfully weakened our country by taking away our sense of national pride and national security. They're teaching our kids from a young age not to be proud to be American and to believe that America's evil. They're destroying everything America is supposed to stand for from within, destroying our independence and our strength as a country. And like for many years, this has been happening right under our noses, but without us really noticing it, because they've also designed society in a way that we have become so entirely self-consumed and distracted and mentally weakened by having easy access to everything that we haven't really realized what was happening. But then COVID, right? Like this was, in my mind, the first experiment in this push for the global one world government. So they tried the isolation method with quarantines and lockdowns, but they didn't count on how many people wouldn't comply. And they tried censoring social media and they created the entire misinformation, disinformation propaganda campaign. But again, there were enough people who saw through the bullshit and didn't comply. And as this agenda is becoming more and more obvious, you have more and more people waking up to what's happening. And so what are we doing? We're all using social media and the internet to communicate with each other and spread the message, right? So what's the easiest way to take it to the next level and push the agenda of control? It's to completely cut off the ability to communicate and isolate people from each other by means of a cyber attack. And like the things that we've talked about in past episodes, and like you just mentioned, the train derailments, the mysterious fires, the factory explosions, like all these things that have significantly increased over the past couple years, I don't think they're accidents. I think they're intentional experiments and acts of terrorism as a way to test us and like see how we respond as a society. Because in all honesty, as a whole, we are so weak and dependent on technology that yes, it will absolutely cause chaos and the breakdown of society and evolve into an actual savage fucking civil war as people try to figure out how to survive because our entire existence has been shifted to be completely dependent on technology and the government. And that brings up a point I want to make about something you mentioned earlier about the scene where Ethan Hawke is pleading with Kevin Bacon to help his son and saying he's not a real man and he doesn't know what to do or how to help him because he doesn't know shit about survival. And like, not only is this true, but it's completely purposeful that we have become this way. Again, this has all been perpetrated by our government. And this is one of the reasons why I love Andy Frisella and why I constantly reference him on the podcast and share clips of his show, because not only is he very disturbingly accurate about everything going on in the world, but part of the basis of his platform is about personal excellence and doing hard shit because people who are mentally, emotionally, and physically strong can't be controlled as easily as weak people. And everything our government does is designed to make us weak. And it's like this push for green energy is just another way to make us more dependent on technology and less in control of our own circumstances. Because if it's not a cyber attack, either from within or from another country, it's going to be our own government intentionally controlling and shutting off power at their whim as a way to control us. And unlike in this movie, where they were still able to drive their cars and they could listen to music on their iPhones and they still had power at the house, when everything's controlled by electric as opposed to gas and fossil fuels, as we talked about on Wednesday with the Biden administration wanting to cut off 60% of our energy, like we're not even going to have these options. We're going to be totally fucking controllable.
Right. Yeah. And I think that that is the message here is like, we can't let ourselves be controlled. We can't buy into what the media is saying. That's why even with the cyber attack being like from China and like it's been here for a year, but now they're just telling us now, or they just figured it out now right after this Netflix movie. Like I'm not really buying it. Yeah, I do think there could be a cyber attack, but like I don't really believe anything they say. What I got from this movie overall is like myself included, we look at these like doomsday preppers as like crazy people, right? Because honestly, like growing up, it was like the only people that were doomsday preppers were people that thought there was going to be like a zombie apocalypse or something, right? But this is a very real thing that our government has warned us about multiple times that there could be an EMP or cyber attack. And just watching this movie really points out like how shit will go downhill real fast. Like you think you have time to get supplies, you don't.
No, but okay. What was your thoughts on the ending of this movie? Because it
Oh,
was
I've got so many thoughts on
fucking
it.
bizarre.
Okay, so many people are pissed about the ending. So again, if you didn't see it yet, you can stop the episode because I'm totally going to spoil it. Okay, so all throughout the movie, the little girl, right? She's like obsessed with the show Friends, and all she wants, as the world is ending, all she wants is to see the season finale of Friends. And like nobody cares. She's asking her mom and dad, like, didn't you watch it? You guys were around in the 90s. Like, I just want to know the ending. No one's paying any attention to this girl. And she just wants to see the last like bit of it. She could care less about what's happening in the world, right? So, okay. I'm going to back up for a second. So hold on to that for a minute. She wants to see the last episode of Friends and no one's listening to her, blah, blah, blah. Hold on to that. This is from like some of the conspiracy theorists on TikTok. Okay. So I'm going to go on like a religious tangent for a second, even though I myself am not like super religious or anything, but I think it's very interesting. In the beginning of the movie, this huge oil tanker gets onto shore, drives right into the beach, and it's called White Lion. And when you look up the symbolism of White Lion, it stands for the Antichrist. Okay. So the White Lion hits the shore. After it hits the shore, that's when you really don't see anyone else in the movie other than the main characters. Like everyone's gone. And they even point that out multiple times. Like the dad drives around and he only sees like one woman and she's like, you're the only person I've seen all day. Well, in the Bible, when the coming of the Antichrist, there's like the rapture. And so all the, Christians they ascend or whatever. Like I didn't read the Bible, but they're all gone and it leaves the people who are not religious. Well, in this movie, as the world is ending, not one of the characters ever pray or like mention religion or God or anything, except for the little girl. The little girl tells her mom this story that she heard on the show The West Wing about this man praying to God when like there was a flood and blah, blah, blah. And the mom looks like really annoyed with her. And so it's kind of like you could tell the parents aren't religious. They didn't teach their kids about religion, but the girl is like curious about this. So the girl, like, I forget what she says, but she says something like she's done with it, or like she's done waiting, I think is what she says. So the next morning, when they all wake up, the little girl's gone, nowhere to be found. They're panicking because they can't find her. So anyhow, at the end, it shows that she breaks into this neighbor's house, right? And the neighbor's house, first of all, it has a red door. And in the biblical times, a red door meant like safety from evil. And it's kind of like messed up, but I guess that they would like sacrifice, I forget if it's a lamb or a goat, and they would put the blood on the door and that would keep them safe. So it's a red door, first thing. Second thing is there's a plaque on the door that says the thorns, like the thorns of Jesus, like his crown or whatever. So anyhow, inside that house that this little girl broke into is the doomsday bunker where she could be safe. And when she gets down, so right before she goes down into the bunker, she can hear her mom calling for her. And instead of going to her mom, she decides, I'm going to go into the bunker and like, fuck you, mom. Like she goes into the bunker. And what is in the bunker? It's a DVD for Friends, and it's the last episode. And what is it called? It's called The Last One. And so that she puts it in and she presses play, and then the movie ends. So everyone's like, what the hell? Well, what happened? What happened to the parents? What, like, there's no ending. Well, the movie made us all feel just like that little girl did throughout the whole movie, where all she wanted to see was what happened at the end of Friends, and no one would listen to her. And now everyone that watched that movie is like, well, what happened? And we're left without a complete ending.
Yeah, and on top of that, like the scene at the end where Julia Roberts and then like the owner's daughter are standing there on the beach and they're watching on the other side where the city is. They're hearing gunshots, they're watching
Mhm.
explosions. It's very clear like the chaos has begun.
Yeah.
And it's like that's the last thing you see of them. You don't see anything that happens to not Kevin Bacon, what's his name?
Ethan
The
Hawke.
Ethan Hawke and then the other father. And
Mhm.
it's like it's just so eerily open-ended and not in a good way. Like
Yeah.
there's not a positive message in this movie whatsoever.
Well, and the other like symbolism that I thought is like they did make a point of showing that the last episode of Friends that the little girl was watching was called The Last One. And like, is she the last one? Because she's the only one that made it to the doomsday bunker. Like, was there like nukes going off or something? And she was the last one. Like, she's the one that will survive, you know? And
Yeah,
then with the biblical thing too, I another one of the paintings in the house showed like America divided into four quadrants. And so people were saying this was like a symbol of like the four horsemen of the apocalypse.
okay, but here's what I want to point out is like if you aren't looking for these things in the movie, you're not going to see them, right? The average viewer is not going to notice any of this symbolism. But it's all
Consciously,
right, but it's all purposefully put there. Like
because your subconscious will notice it.
yes, there's none of this was by accident.
Mhm.
None of the symbolism in this movie is by accident. And that's what should make people really fucking scared.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I've mentioned this before on the podcast a while back, but like for every like 100 bits of stimuli that your conscious mind picks up, your subconscious picks up like 11 billion bits. It's like insane the difference. So your subconscious is picking up on all of this. And that's the thing with predictive programming. It's not like people are consciously going to be like, oh my God, like I'm scared that right wing extremists are going to take control of the government or like things like that. It's all subconscious. It's to implant fear in us and basically manipulate us, just like she says in the movie, manipulate how we think and how we feel, and to keep everyone in this state of fear and chaos and not trusting one another.
And that was another theme in this movie was the very clear racist undertones.
Oh, yeah.
I
Yep.
mean, throughout the entire movie, it was pushing that narrative as well.
Well, again, what was stage one? Stage one is to keep us from like communicating, keep us divided. What better way to divide people than with racism? And oh yeah, the racial undertones were thick throughout the movie. So again, I think that was purposeful to have this us versus them subconscious belief. So it's just crazy. And again, like if Obama wasn't the producer, I
It
don't know
was,
that I'd even
yeah.
do this episode. Like I'd probably be like, whatever, it's just a movie. Because I've heard about predictive programming before, and I've always been like, oh, what? Like the CIA is working with Hollywood, haha. But no, like literally, like the most powerful man in the world was behind this movie and very purposefully working closely with the director. So, like, yeah, I do. I totally believe this is predictive programming, and I think everyone should watch it. And from what I hear, people are watching it over and over, and they're saying they're picking up more and more of this symbolism. So, I don't know.
Yeah. Because now I'm going to have to watch it again just to look for the symbolism because I really wasn't looking for that when I watched it. I was just appalled by the whole cyber attack, part of the movie. And I was not looking at all the tiny details. So I'm going to go back and do that too and scare myself even more.
Yeah. Oh, one more thing I'm just going to throw in there because I just heard this right before we recorded. Remember, like all the deer, there were like the
Yeah.
bucks with like the big. So there's so many theories on the deer, but I heard one lady say, the buck stops here. The buck stops with me. What does Biden always fucking say? Remember when he became president, he's like, the buck stops with me, or like whatever he said. And I was like, is this like referencing that? Like, okay, we got Biden in and now like the world is freaking destroyed. Like, I don't know. I think that there's something with that too. So I'm going to have to dig into that some more. But yeah, have fun with this one, you guys. Like, and please share all of the symbols that you find because I am fascinated. And yeah, have fun with that this weekend. And we'll see you back here on Monday. Thanks for tuning in. If you're sick of all the crazy shit going on in our country and you want to express your support and patriotism for the show, head on over to our Etsy store at UO Patriot Chicks and check out our new stickers. The link can also be found on our website. If you love the show and you want exclusive episodes, support the podcast and join the conversation by becoming a member of our Patreon community. We'll be posting weekly member-only podcast episodes and content that isn't available on the weekly podcast. Every Patreon member will also get a free Unapologetically Outspoken sticker and updates about our new sticker release before they're made public. And be sure to follow us on TikTok at Unapologetically Outspoken. And if you haven't done so already, please rate and review the podcast. The more you support us, the more people we can reach. So help us spread the word.